Hello, everyone. This is David Eats 2. I think we need to focus on a couple things. Rockbridge Network, the billionaires, but also where our economy is heading. Due to the shutdown, the 2025 shutdown, we are starting into a crisis, the longest in history, has exposed deepened fractures within the federal budgeting, a social welfare program, policies, and economic strategies. They're all cracking. Once at its core, proposed cuts of the Supplemental Net Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, lapses in Affordable Care Act, ACA, subsidies, a sweeping tax reform for the rich and big business. These changes have triggered cascading effects across income brackets, industries, and public institutions. With the ACA and SNAP cuts, there's an economic and social fallout. The House passed the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, you know about that, including a $186 billion in SNAP cuts over 10 years, which doesn't sound like a lot, but look at how they did it, how they're trying to do it right now. These reductions disproportionately affect low-income families, veterans, and children. Columbia University Poverty Centers estimates that every $1 cut from SNAP costs society $14 to $20 in long-term economic losses due to worsened health, education, and employment outcomes. In other words, that $1 into SNAP is going to cost 14 to 20 because people are going to lose their jobs, not going to be able to get to education because they're not making money, and it just cascades. It's a cascading effect. We need to really pay attention to. ACA subsidies set to expire threatens a raise in premiums for millions. The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities warns that the lapse will increase the uninsured rate, burden emergency services, and destabilize rural healthcare systems, shut down economics and sectoral impacts. The Congress Budget Office projects a $7 to $14 billion in permanent economic losses from the shutdown, primarily due to furloughed federal employees and delayed spending, key impacts included. By delaying the spending, they're going to cause these effects down the road. For every spending we're not doing now, that means the person who collects the money or is who's going to get the money doesn't have that income to spend now, so that creates a gap in spending. Normal people loss of food aid, healthcare access, and wages. 42 million SNAP recipients face food insecurities. Small businesses reduce consumer spending, especially in food, retail, and healthcare. SNAP dollars typically double in a local economic activity. Large corporations, short-term tax relief, but long-term instability in labor markets. In other words, and consumer demand. Due to the people not being able to get a job, losing their job, employment, losing income, they will not be able to afford to buy consumer goods, which would cost in the long term the large corporations that depend on people spending. That is the issue that we're going to get long term. Yes, it looks great for the large corporations and the rich right now, but down the road when these people can't work because they can't buy stuff, which kills supply and demand, which is great in the beginning, but as it progresses, it'll get worse and worse, and soon it'll cost the wealthy and the corporations. Wealthy individuals benefit from proposed tax gains, capital tax gains, and estate tax reductions, but force the market volatility and risk, reputational risk. It looks great in the first, but if you don't tax the gains, then we're not getting that money. What the rich do is, you can see it on here, the rich will get a capital gain, or they'll make profit, and instead of taking that profit and using that for themselves to spend and pay the taxes on it, they'll reinvest it and then take a loan out against that capital gain. What politicians and everybody's trying to tell you is unrealized gains and realized gains are two different things. You can't tax unrealized gains, is what they're saying. And I may need some clarification from an economist on what the real definition of an unrealized gain. The way I understand, an unrealized gain is something that you don't realize how much profit you're going to make off of it until you sell it. So yes, it's unrealized and you can't tax that gain because you don't know how much it is. But if they pull out and sell it, that profit is taxed. So really you're not taxing the unrealized gains, you're taxing the gain that they get from selling the product later on. And that's what I think the misnomer is they're trying to tell you, oh, you can't pay taxes on unrealized gains. They're right. You can't pay taxes on an unrealized gain because there's no limit. There's no amount. But once you sell it, there's now a profit, so you can get the gain, the tax on that. That's what I see as them lying or actually bending the truth so that you believe that they're trying to tax something that's not there. And that's what I think we need to address is we need to start facing and telling these Congress and the government that we're not falling for this anymore. We need to stop it and do what's right so that we can improve our economy. We're supposed to be the world's richest nation, but we can't afford to feed our people or healthcare for all. Many countries have healthcare for all, and it works. We just need to do Medicare for all. Do away with the profit-based healthcare. Get rid of that, and you will solve a lot of problems. Stop allowing healthcare to say, oh, you can't have that surgery because we can, this program says we can't. They're using AI now to decide whether you're going to do it. And some people have said they're using AI for other things. We need to stop and we need to get the government to redo what they're saying about the AI and doing restrictions because it is costing our security. So we're no longer a person with our healthcare separate. Now our healthcare can be grabbed by United Healthcare besides what we're supposed to be telling them. Government can go, hey, I want to see what this person's being treated for. Go and get that. And what everybody harps on about the Roe v. Wade loss, yeah, it took the confidentiality of the woman's healthcare, but it also put in place, along with all the rest of it that everybody keeps ignoring, the patient-doctor confidentiality. They've removed that. So now government can say, hey, we want this information. If there's laws, I'd have to double check, but right now they took away that privacy from that decision. There are other things in place, but they can remove those. We need to stop healthcare regulations as far as what can be done on healthcare. Go to Medicare for all, stop using AI to decide what treatments you're going to use, and do basic healthcare that's not for profit all the time. Remove the for profit. Okay. Tax cuts and deficit expansion. The proposed tax reform favor high income earners and corporations, reducing federal revenue by estimated 1.2 trillion over 10 years without offsetting spending costs, cuts, revenue sources. The deficit would exceed $2 trillion annually by 2028. So in 3 years, well, now almost two, down to almost two, we're going to be $2 trillion a year. So 2, 4, it's going to continue to go up and it's going to drive our deficit up as exponentially, really, as time goes on. The Bitcoin, this is the biggest farce. It seems like it's a great deal and people say, oh, it's great, it'll work, we can use it. No, it decentralizes and resists inflation, yes, by not having it in one place. They can no longer hedge the dollar for depreciation on that. You have to get an expert to explain that one. Disadvantages, extremely volatile. Just as an example, Bitcoin lost 60% of its value in 2022. So if you take $100 million and you have that loss, you now take that 100 million down to 40 million. What will that do to our economy? Bad things, basically. Lack of regulatory clarity and systematic risks. There's no regulations. There's no federal bank backing. There's no World Bank backing it. There's no government controlling it. There's no way to subside it. So it's so volatile. You don't know what's going to happen. That can hurt us drastically. Incompatibility with monetary policies, tools like interest rates control. They're taking away interest control so that they can use interest control to control recessions and inflation and all that. They're taking that away because you're now putting in Bitcoin. Most economists reject Bitcoin as a reserve asset due to the speculative nature and lack of liquidity. You can't withdraw it exactly when you need it. That is a big disadvantage, which they're overlooking in Congress. And I'm not sure if they're overlooking it on purpose or they're overlooking it because they don't know. My philosophy is what they're trying to do is they're trying to put the Bitcoin in. So all the initial people that are crypto, the reason to put it in because all the original people that put into crypto and drove it up want out now because it's going to stagnate eventually. So they want out so that they can pull out the profit. We put our United States putting a big bulk of money into the crypto market. Now they can sell their crypto, which will drive the market down and make them the profit. Think about that when they talk about that. The solution to reduce the deficit is to restore fiscal balance. The following measures are recommendations. They're recommendations based upon studies, peer review sources, and such that have made these recommendations, which will get us back on track. We need to restore the SNAP and ACA funding to prevent long-term economic losses. We need to restore the ACA subsidies because the health insurance has not decreased. It's only gone up. They did not decrease after C-19. So there's our issue because they didn't decrease. We still need the subsidies. Unless they make those go away and turn it over to Medicare for all. Implement progressive taxation on capital gains and high incomes. So in other words, make them pay taxes for what their profits are and the capital gains. Don't allow them to hide it into reinvestments. Close corporate loopholes. In other words, take all the loopholes out that they have so that they can write off the taxes and not pay any taxes. So what you do is you put a tax floor, a minimum tax. So say like 30%, 25, 30%, even up to 40, 45%, making that tax floor there so that you ensure you get that taxation. Because the rich and the big corporations need to pay taxes as much as our percentage is lower and middle income. That will help the economy immensely. Invest in infrastructure and green energy, which yields higher economic multipliers. We need to keep up our infrastructure and keep progressing and moving towards the future. Also switch over to green energy, which is a better economic and better for the economy and not as pollutant, which in the long run will be helpful. Audit defense spending and reduce waste. In other words, there's a lot of money spent in our Department of Defense, and I'm not going to call it what they call it. There's a lot of spending there. We need to look at that and see what really needs to be sent there and what can be invested somewhere else. We do need to pay our troops. We do need the forces, but do we need as much as we need? We can reduce it to a livable thing so that we can make it further. If we can reduce that budget, it will help in the long run. I also suggest instead of doing year-end clear-outs, in other words, at the end of the year, they have $20 billion across all their funds, all their accounts. They get rid of it. They buy stuff. They buy junk to get them to zero. That needs to stop. At the end of the year, say they have $20 billion in their we won't go as high. So the next time they put their budget up, they say, okay, here's your budget amount. This is how much we budgeted for you. And don't subtract anything out of the budget. This is your budget. Now, when they go to apply the budget, they say, okay, here's what your budget is. You have 20 billion or $1 trillion left. So we slap that in, subtract that from the total so that they still have the same budget, but now you have the extra money to put elsewhere. If they did that across the government, we would actually start building up, and sooner or later, we would be paying ourselves from our profits. So investments and all that will help. And cutting back on that spending would be who rises if the trends continue. In other words, who gets up and makes more money in the end? If current policies persist, wealthy investors and large corporations will consolidate power through tax advantages and market domination. So they'll just dominate the market and basically create monopolies, which we're trying to get away from. Low-income families and small business will face increased hardships, reduced mobility, and economic exclusions. You'll be stuck where you are, having a hard time to try to increase anything and won't get any gains. There's no economic value to it. And you're stuck where you are. So they have you locked in place. States with strong safety nets may emerge as havens, while others may fall behind. And you have states that are very well off that are making a good budget and actually helping out their people. Those countries may become havens, or those states may become havens, whereas the states that are barely making it and getting subsidies from the government through these other ones that are doing well will now be cut off, hurting, and they can't help their people because they don't have the funds to help the people. That's what needs to stop. We need to make it across the board. Everybody is equal, and we do the economy, and we take the economies that work and try to apply them to the government. And I do not believe in the zero budget, zeroing out the budget. That is the wrong approach, in my opinion, in the long run. It can help us. And I understand what people say about zero budget. If we don't spend it, we'll get less next year. But if you don't spend it, do you really need that much next year? And also, you have these emergency funds. The military has them for accidents that happen, collisions at sea, fires that happen, things that get destroyed, equipment that gets destroyed, so they can replace it quickly. Instead of zeroing out that budget at the end of the year and putting it back putting it across the economy so you can spend this, no, leave that budget there. And hey, even have it on an interest-bearing investment so that it gains money each year. And sooner or later, you can start scraping off that profit and put it in other spending. That's, I think, a primary problem that we're having. If SNAP and ACA cuts are enacted and tax reform favor the wealthy, the U.S. will likely see a rise in child poverty and food insecurities, increased healthcare costs and preventable deaths, preventable unlivings, greater income inequities, and political polarization, a weakened dollar, and diminished global economy leadership. And that's what we're seeing already on a small scale. It's going to increase. This is why it is no longer blue, red. It's no longer Republican, Democrat. We have the people in places around that will fix this, but we need to stop and say, hey, this is bullshit. This is not political. This is right and wrong. We need to decide where we're going. If you don't want to help the people and want to see them suffering, then move to another country. Plain and simple. We need to band together as people, and MAGA, we need to wake up and say, I was duped and I want to help us further our economy. We need to get together. If you know of certain things, I don't know of any right now. The festival's going on. I'm sure there are. I think there's one on the 11th and some on Veterans Day. We need to make those big. We need to make the numbers from the last one look tiny. We need to show government that we want change. We do not want what they're pushing. We did great on this last election, but we need to go further and push for better. Now, I'm not saying vote red, vote blue. I'm saying research, find out who has the best policies going further, and stop looking out for yourself and look after everybody as a whole. Democrats do have some good things. They need to go back to their original beliefs and help out. There is some parties that I would recommend. The Progressive Democrat of America. They are progressive and they're trying to push. They're part of the Democratic Party. And I think you understand why they're part of that party. The Tea Party and the Green parties and those parties are looking for socialists, and they're trying to take over and become a system that does not work. They have not really succeeded anyway. Right now you have the two-party system. We need to get away from that. We need more parties. So let's progress towards that and start putting it at ground level. We need to do away with electoral college, and we need to do away with this two-party system and allow for a better system. Ranked choice voting would be a great way to go. We have the system in place that we use for taking tests for colleges. We have it for our banking. All these things are in place, and corporations use security that is almost impenetrable. Of course, there's always going to be a risk. There's always going to be people that can hack it. So keep updating the security. But if we use like the ID codes and the authentication codes through a phone that's attached to a person so they can log in and we know who it is. And for that fact, if it's a vote for something, they could actually have you turn the camera on so they can actually put your face and verify that you're the one that's voting. Is there a way around that? I'm sure there is. But these are steps that we can take And I'm sure they could test the fair, find out if it's a fake image or whatever, it's an AI or whatever. So that's where we need to go. And if we take that away from going to the polls, think about what that would say. If you don't have the polls anymore, you don't have the people counting, the votes would be instantaneously into the system and be able to be counted. And that should be a secure system with no other way to get into it and go from there. I mean, there's smarter people in programming that can come up with something that on that level. But this is where we need to press towards. Make it better for everybody, not just the rich. Do away with tax credits for the rich, help out the lower middle income. Put the social programs in place. And if you want to do away with the social programs, the welfare, a SNAP, the TANF, and all that, and help the homeless, the best way to do that is increase minimum wage to a livable wage so they could pay their rent and live and actually eat. You wouldn't have, if you did that, they would be better off. I mean, you could even go so far as people under this amount, say under 100,000, get 500, yeah, 400 to 500 a month. That does away with any cheating, and that would cover SNAP. They would do away with the SNAP. Those are just ways we can get around it, and I think that we need to push for at least change of what's happening. They need to reinstate the SNAP, reinstate the ACA subsidies, undo these tax benefits to the rich, add on a tax for the rich equal to what percentage the lower income pay, ensure they pay their taxes, pay their share of taxes, make sure the corporations pay their share of taxes. That would improve our economy. If people are livable, they spend. If they spend, it makes profit, which improves the economy all the way around. I hope y'all understand what I was getting to here and understand the trajectory we were on and how bad it could be and how we need to save it. And don't let the politicians tell you otherwise, because they are doing what is best for them. Thank you for your time. Like, share, follow. Please remember you are loved no matter what you do. And contact your representatives and tell you want this to end and end the shutdown, because the shutdown is for a continuing resolution that ends in 13 days now. 21st of November is when that continuing resolution ends. So why are we still shut down? Why aren't we working on a new plan? Thank you for your time.